Mm, mm, mm. Well, I guess you say, what can make me feel this way? My girl, talking about my girl, my girl. Sing. Hi, friends. Welcome back to Save Black Girl Reads, where I am your host, Ariel, the best friend in your head that you never knew that you needed, but you are so glad that you have. Welcome back to week 3 of Marriage Be Hard by Kevin and Melissa Frederick, the 12 conversations and all the good jazz. Oh, to keep you from laughing, to keep you laughing, loving, and learning with your partner. And in this week's discussion, we are going over chapter 7, chapter 8, and chapter 9, Fighting Be Hard, Parenting Be Hard, and Quarantine Be Hard. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and jump right into it. So in chapter 7, Fighting Be Hard, they started off addressing perceptions of fighting with facts. So things like fighting is a certainty in marriage, fighting is natural, arguments can be productive, conflict doesn't have to be bad, things of things of that nature, just to kind of like normalize it and kind of to normalize it so that everybody understands that, you know what? My relationship is normal if we are having fights and if we are arguing. It just kind of depends on how you all are fighting. And they also talked about how your family of origin can actually contribute to how you approach disagreements and things like that in your relationship. So they both actually went over the backgrounds of their family of origins and how they became acquainted with fighting in their marriage. Melissa talked about how her parents, when she was younger, they actually went from like knockout, drag outs, yelling across the rooms, throwing stuff, to actually like getting to know Jesus. And now there's a holy hush over the household as it pertains to arguments and things like that. Versus Kevin and his family background, actually talking about how his stepfather, who he considers to be his dad, and his mom, basically they speak peacefully and things of that nature. And so and they address the issues head on. And that's just how they handle their discussions. So they basically talked about having these different perspectives attributed to their own marriage, and that you and your partner may want to actually kind of flesh that out and maybe investigate it a little bit more to kind of reflect on and to see if that actually plays a part in how you approach disagreements and things like that with your partner. So yeah, and then finish the chapter with like 7 tips for fighting fair, of like keeping the main thing, don't name call, manage the argument temperature, and if it gets a little too high, like step it away, stuff like that. No yelling, basically. You can stop being mad while you're still mad, and like obviously don't get physical, even to the point of like if you have to express your anger by punching a wall or anything like that, like even that is like a zero tolerance, no type of situation. And like don't emotionally shut down. So they covered it. They went into grave detail about it. Again, this is just high level overview, but I think the main gist of the chapter was to really kind of normalize it, to say like, hey, conflict is normal, conflict is natural, especially between two human beings who didn't grow up the same, and that it is to be expected. But I think they wanted people to walk away with tactics and tools in order to like have conflict and do so in a fair manner, so that everybody can be heard, and things of that nature. So going on to chapter 8, which is Parenting Be Hard. This chapter was designated to them being more open with their kids in the discussion around sex. And they actually talk about how they took a very different approach to that conversation than their parents did, because as we can refer back to previous chapters of the book, Kevin's mom only had a 3-line conversation with him once he returned from college at 19. And Melissa's mom, I believe, was like, she details, and I guess like some of the podcasts and stuff like that, of how her mom would come with like photos from the doctor's office that she worked at, and also just how, like, you know, anything pertaining to like sex ed and things of that nature, or the discussion of sex even at church, was very much so of, you're gonna get pregnant, you're gonna get an STD type of situation, don't do it. So Kevin goes through this really interesting incident with some Ajax in his hand that is just really kind of, I felt so sorry for baby Kevin, because oh my gosh. But he used that particular example. If you want the details, I'm not spilling the tea. If you want the details, go read the book. He uses that particular example of this incident to admonish parents to talk to their children on page 145. If you don't give them, meaning if you don't give your kids accurate information, they will get it from some stupid kid. And so again, I'm not going to tell you the details of it, but he did get some information from a friend. He tried it. It was catastrophic for him. And I don't want to say, yeah, it was terrible for him. And essentially, that was his way of admonishing parents to actually talk to their children about sex, because essentially, if you're not teaching them about it, you can't in all realness assume that your child is just not having the discussion. They're more than likely talking to a friend who knows the bare minimum. And so it's better for you. His admonishment was more so that it's better for you to have this conversation with your kid than finding out from some stupid kid who's also their age. So Melissa also in this chapter gives the continuation of, you know, the First Lady's prayer that she talks about in like the first chapter or something like that, where the First Lady was out here praying that, you know, if the kids was out here being involved in the sexual activities, that the Lord would expose them. And she further actually talks about how the First Lady's son had gotten a girl pregnant after that prayer. And I was just like, man, you can't make this stuff up. And she also talks about, and Melissa also talks about how her older sister was also caught up in the shenanigans and had gotten pregnant. I think her sister had gotten pregnant as well. So I'm just like, wow. So clearly the prayer worked, but I don't know I wonder if the First Lady was actually expecting that it was going to be her own kid and she was going to now be a grandmother. I don't know. But I was just like, this is wild. You really can't make this stuff up. But also, again, the scaring kids tactic into talking about sex is not productive. And, you know, get uncomfortable, get comfortable with being uncomfortable, I think was a lot of the gist of this particular chapter. I will say that that I found it refreshing to hear Kevin as a dad uphold a high standard around sexuality with their sons, and how he actually described it on pages 148 through 149, where he said, I want our boys to own their sexuality. I want them to be proud of it, but I also want them to honor sex as something God designed to take place in marriage. While I do want them to wait, I also recognize that their reverence for sex may look different from mine. And I found that to be totally and completely refreshing, because, as someone who grew up, during the time that I grew up, the conversation was very different, vastly different from the conversation that I hear of Black men that I know who are wanting to have conversations with their sons or with their children in general about talking to them about sex. And I think that from perspective and what they are talking about, especially as it pertains to boys, and letting his boys know that he wants them to again attempt to uphold the bloodstained banner, to really commit to the understanding of sex and the design that God created it for, and walking in the way of that, as opposed to what society would say is a norm. I thought that was very refreshing to hear a man speak of that by way of what he wants his sons to do. And I was very proud of that, because as someone who also grew up churchy a lot of times, and here's what sometimes they don't tell you about growing up in just like Melissa and Kevin talked about earlier, they don't necessarily have the conversation. It's pretty out of one side of the mouth, but they're doing one. It's a do as I say, not as I do type of situation sometimes in church, where you have the men saying one thing or approaching the young men about how they should be doing the things, but then the men actually behaving in other ways and in different ways, and also giving different messaging by way of either their behavior or outwardly saying like, yes, I know this is the case, but also you need to know something different. Like I have I have heard of men folk, saying one thing to the nieces and the daughters and things of that nature, and then saying something totally and completely different to the sons and the nephews about, you got try it before you buy, like test drive the car, all the things, just the ridiculousness of it. And I thought it was very refreshing that Kevin actually was like, I would want them to have a certain reverence for it, but I also give them space to view sex from a space of reverence that they create of their own volition, after their mom and I have actually taught them in the ways that we would want them to know about it. I think Melissa also gives a nod to that, but she says a very bold statement around preparation for the kids on page 150 as well. And she talks about how it's our job to prepare kids for a healthy sense of their bodies and sex, more than it is our job to ensure they remain virgins until their wedding. And I was like, Melissa is gonna shake the saints with this one, but it's also okay. And I actually agree with her in the statement that she made. Be it as bold as it is, I think from her perspective and from how I was raised, I definitely would have wanted parental figures and things like that were in the space of fostering a type of identity around myself. I would have wanted someone to actually have the conversations about, the what your body does naturally, and a healthy sense of that, as opposed to everything is shameful and just don't do anything. Which, in adulthood, I've had to go back, unpack, unlearn things of that nature. But and then there were some things that I really did appreciate. I think my mother did a very good job of attempting, she did what she could. And I did a very good job of having conversations about sex and the science behind the body. Which was definitely, and she had it as an evolving conversation as I evolved and as I grew. The conversation also did so. And so that there was that, but I thought that Melissa kind of put it in such a poignant way of just like, having a healthy sense of your body and your body's functions as it pertains to sex, and how it is natural and not nasty, or shameful. And so I think that, and in the space of that, making that the priority over just don't have sex before you're married type of teaching, because again, shame and fear tactics rarely work in this instead of getting the result that you absolutely require and desire for your children. Just saying. In my opinion. One more thing. And so basically, just kind of like how I talked about the conversations that my mom and I had, that's something that they actually talk about, of like having consistent and evolving conversations with your child as they get older. So and Melissa kind of like maps it out in terms of what, what they're talking about, or what they talked about with their boys when they were younger versus what they're talking about with their boys and they're now teenagers, X, Y, and Z, and blah, 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 blah. Kevin also talks about some of the things that they are teaching their boys now that they were not taught. And they know that it is very risky to talk about, especially as it pertains to growing up churchy. But I think all in all, like, I thought that the conversation was, or I thought that the chapter was very well done. Moving on to chapter 9, Quarantine Be Hard. With this chapter, Melissa started off describing quarantine as the start in a shift in their relationship. And she talks about it on page 157, where she says, it changed things that were previously in place, or so we thought, but it also forced issues that were below the surface to come up and be dealt with. And I thought that, she kind of introed it very well in terms of the intro to the chapter, but she also kind of highlighted some things in terms of what a heightened level of I think she and Kevin both did a great job of a heightened level of talking about and talking through their emotions of what is actually taking place at the time that they are in quarantine. The things that they used to do are now ineffective in the season that is quarantine, right? So things that they were able to just kind of brush off and move past or ignore by way of their busy schedules and going in different directions and being pulled in different directions as parents, as spouses, things of that nature, are now coming home to roost because they ain't got nowhere to go and they just in this house. And so Melissa talks about how she's dealing with a lot of things. She's going through depression. She's going through anxiety around being an entrepreneur, dealing with insecurities about being an entrepreneur. She had events take place that have further fed her insecurities in this area, stuff to fall through, stuff to not happen, things of that nature. And Kevin was also having anxiety around being able to provide for his family during a time of quarantine where he can't tour as a comedian, where, again, they are very entrepreneurial people. So they have these questions coming up and really trying to think through what to do about the things that they're now being faced with. And a lot of the frustrations, the anxieties, the depression, the thing, again, and their routine of what they normally do to just move past things is not working. It sends them to therapy, essentially. The chapter pretty much centers around the events that led them to therapy, and also the feelings that they were feeling in the space of quarantine that also led them to therapy. And how over time they've, and how in getting to therapy, they've learned to unpack and unravel some of the bad behaviors that they've taken into this space. So, and then they pretty much sum it up very nicely on page 168, where it says, sometimes all the errands and plans and other things you do to keep busy cover up the resentment, the unresolved issues, and the unmet needs. Don't wait until a global pandemic forces you to deal with that stuff. Tune into your feelings, your stresses, how life changes are affecting you. Articulate those feelings to your partner before they blow up. Don't stay silent, even if you think doing so protects your partner and your marriage. And so I thought that was very, very much so a nice summation of chapter 9 of Quarantine Be Hard. And so that is it for chapters 7, 8, and 9 of Fighting Be Hard, Parenting Be Hard, and Quarantine Be Hard. Next week is our final week because this book only had 12 chapters. So we are 3/4 of the way done with the book. Congratulations, sis and bro. Proud of you. You have already gotten through 3/4 of the way through the book. And so here is the thing that I am going to say. I am in a space where usually throughout the year, I am definitely more of a nonfiction reader than a fiction reader. But towards the end of the year, I get to a point where I'm usually exhausted of nonfiction and I want just a little bit more in terms of fiction in my life, just to kind of balance out everything that I'm reading or everything that I have on the list to read. So I am in a space of thinking about and actually looking at different options for fictional reads in the upcoming future in the upcoming future and some future videos. So far I've thought about, and I think I am very excited to read a book by Stacey Abrams called While Justice Sleeps. And it's supposed to be like this type of thriller, suspense type of book. And I think and it's the Stacey Abrams. So if you don't, I don't understand how you've gone through our life without knowing who Stacey Abrams is, but it's the Stacey Abrams, the one who flipped Georgia and turned it blue from red during the 2020 presidential election, is that Stacey Abrams. So she wrote this book called While Justice Sleeps, and it came out April of this year. So I really want to read it because it's supposed to be like this thriller suspense kind of book, and I'm really excited to just like sink my teeth into something that is not as nonfiction and going over people's lives and discussing that. But all of that to say that I actually still have an excitement around reading this book, Red Lip Theology by Candace Marie Bimbo. And that is going to be the next book that I start once I finish Marriage Be Hard. So, and I really feel the need to actually, she says things that triggers me as a safe Black woman or safe Black girl who reads. She does say things that really triggers me, but I'm really excited to read it because there's already, and like I've already read like the foreword or something like that, and it talks about how like she really just kind of patterns this after for colored girls who consider suicide when the rainbow wasn't enough. And so she actually did a subtitle of for church girls who consider tithing to the beauty store when Sunday morning isn't enough. So I'm interested to read it, and she's actually based out of North Carolina, which is I don't know if you needed to know that or not, but just wanted to share that. But yeah, I'm excited to read that book, but I'm also excited to add some fiction into, some fictional authors as well into the space, and also support Black authors because that's what I want to do. So not too much about chapters 7, 8, and 9. I will say that I was really excited and I was full steam ahead. And I will say it like this. I was full steam ahead about Marriage Be Hard and the book and things of that nature. I like the setup of how they actually address the things. I do find myself getting a little exhausted with the chapters and the setup. And again, like I'm not as exhausted when I'm listening to the book as to when I'm reading the book. So I want to be, mindful of that. But I think even as a space of someone who I really, I'm a fan of the On Stages. I follow both of them on Instagram. I tuned in every week to the Love Hour podcast when they had that. So I don't know if my exhaustion with the chapters of the book have to do with somewhat knowing some of these stories and hearing it, and also getting some of the new stories. I don't know. But I will say that I am really, towards the end of the book, I am powering through the book. I will just say that. Even as a fan of the On Stages, I am someone who's powering through this book. That's not to say that they don't have great tips. They do. It's and the tips seem as though they are helpful. But I'm also in the space of like, I heard this before. And so that's where I sit. So I just wanted to be honest about that. But again, the book is good. It has the humor of like, it has the humor of Kev on Stage with the deep reflective dynamic of Melissa. So it's balanced. I will say that. But we will be coming in next week to talk about chapters 10, 11, and 12. Divorce be hard, self-worth be hard, and the lessons from 18 years of marriage. So we will commence next week to finish out the things. And then the following week after that, we'll be jumping into Red Lip Theology. So I just wanted to show you the book so that you could actually, see it for what it is. And then I want to say after Red Lip Theology, we might be jumping into the Stacey Abrams book, because I am a fan of Stacey Abrams. I did not know that Stacey Abrams was also I knew that she had written like a children's book. So I knew that she was like a fictional author. I didn't realize that she was also like author of like suspense and thriller books. Did not realize that was also a thing. So I'm excited to crack it open, read it, and then I'll, of course, we'll give our thoughts and things like that. We'll kiki over the book, give the high level overview, and then whether you can decide whether or not you really want to sink your teeth into it or not. Okay. All right, guys. So until next week, saints, I'll see you in the next video. Bye.